All right, Sam. So we're going to talk about the LA riots. Um, so the LA riots are in April of 1992. So this is during Bush's presidency, Bush 1, Bush Senior. Um, what number is this, Sam?
P.
P like Peter?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So yeah, April of 1992 in Los Angeles, we're going to get the largest riot in American history breaking out. The second largest riot in American history breaking out across Los Angeles. It's going to last a full week, and it's going to involve thousands and thousands of structure fires. We're talking like 4,500 structure fires is what we're dealing with. Now, we have some long-term causes and some short-term causes. Okay, the short-term cause, the immediate cause of this is the beating of the man in the picture here. His name is Rodney King. Rodney King, and he has no relation to Martin Luther King, no relation at all. So Rodney King is African American guy. He was drunk driving through Los Angeles, and so the police officers pulled him over. But when they pulled him over, the police officers then proceeded to savagely beat him. They savagely beat this guy. They dragged him out of the car. They were beating him with clubs and kicking him, and they broke his skull in like 6 places. They almost very nearly killed him. They did not kill him, but they almost did. Now, police violence against African Americans, unfortunately, has been with us since the beginning of the United States, right? For forever. But what makes this one stand out is that it was videotaped. This is one of the first ones to be videotaped. Now, one of the things you have to write in your notes, you have to make sure you know in your notes, is that this is not a time when videotaping things is normal, right? It's not, there is no such thing as cell phones or smartphones yet. They just don't exist, right? Nobody has cameras in them. You would have to have like an actual carry it out like a camcorder, right, with you. And so if you had to have an actual camcorder with you, who walks around with a camcorder?
Yeah.
Like nobody does, right? It's not the same as having a smartphone in your pocket. Okay, today, smartphone in your pocket, you can videotape anything all the time. It's really easy to videotape things, right? But back then, you're having to record it on an actual tape and it with an actual recorder. And so that's why it never happened. But this time it happened. This time somebody happened to have a camcorder in their car, and then they grabbed the camcorder and they started to record it. So Rodney King, sues the police. He sues the police, and this videotape is going to become the primary evidence used against the police officers. Now, as soon as this happens, the tension starts to ratchet up in the community, right? The Black community is upset, right? They're angry. Things are getting progressively angrier. They're meeting in churches. They're meeting in social groups, right? They're protesting outside of the courthouse, right? That they want these cops to be brought to justice. The 4 police officers down here are put on trial, and they are found completely innocent on all charges. They basically make an argument that because Rodney King was drunk, that they did what they had to do. Okay? They basically did what we today would recognize as victim blaming. Anyway, these cops get off. They get completely scot-free, even though we have like a 5-minute video of them doing this. Okay? And in the video, we also very clearly see Rodney King trying to surrender. He's got his hands up, he's trying to surrender, and the cops are beating him, right? Knocking him down on the ground, even though he's trying to surrender. Now, he is drunk, that is true. It is true that he is drunk, right? So the cops were justified in pulling him over. He was driving erratically, he was drunk driving, right? But just because he was drunk driving does not give the police officer the right to beat him.
Yeah.
Right? If a cop witnesses you doing a crime, let's say a really terrible crime, Sam, if a police officer witnesses you murdering somebody, right? Like you stab someone right in front of the cop. What does the cop have the right to do to you?
Um, first things first, they can like arrest me. And if I'm still like aggravated and like still technically threatening, they could, if I had a gun or some reason, like if I turned the corner like I had a gun, like I was a threat to them, they could technically shoot me, or they could like taser me. They could do something to get me down on the ground so I'm no longer a threat.
Okay. So if a police officer witnesses you doing a crime, they have the right to arrest you and defend themselves. That's it. That's it. They do not have the right to beat you. They do not have the right to murder you. They do not have the right to shoot first. They do not have the right to do that. They can't. Cops cannot do that, right? If you're like across the parking lot with a knife in your hand, they don't get to shoot you from their car.
Yeah.
That's not how it works, right? They can threaten you. They can pull the gun out and threaten you and try to get you to put it down, right? And then if you attempt to stab them, then they can defend themselves.
Yeah, like if I was running towards them with a knife, like that would
Sure,
be a no.
right? Or you had a gun that you were shooting at them or something like that,
Yeah.
right? Like it's, they can defend themselves. Police officers can defend themselves and they can arrest you. They cannot beat you, right? So if
Yeah.
Rodney King is guilty of drunk driving, and by all accounts he was driving,
Yeah.
right? That does not give them the right to do this to him,
No.
right? It doesn't give them the right to do that.
Yeah.
Now, that's the short-term cause. The police are released and found innocent, and then the riots break out. The long-term cause, so let's deal with long-term causes here. The long-term cause is that the United States has the economy of the early 1990s is one of the worst economies in American history. Very, very bad economy. Okay, the unemployment rate was over 10%. The unemployment rate was as high as 20% in some parts of the country. Okay, so the economy is very, very bad, including Los Angeles, where a lot of people are poor, and Los Angeles is also one of the most expensive cities in the
Uh-huh.
country. Okay, but the bigger problem is the race issues with Los Angeles. Los Angeles is one of the most diverse counties in the country, right? Perhaps one of the most racially diverse counties in the entire world. And Los Angeles has massive populations of Black people, of white people, of Mexican people, of other Latino people, of Chinese, of Korean, of whoever, Armenians, and whoever, right? Like Los Angeles has entire neighborhoods of all these different culture groups and racial groups, and a lot of them view themselves as being in competition or as enemies with the other groups. A lot of them view that way, right? There's this perception that the Mexicans are all here to steal the jobs of all the hardworking people or something like that, right? Or that, the blacks are the criminal element of the county and that they're causing trouble, or that, the Asians are unwilling to work with any other groups, that they're only willing to work with their own people. A lot of these things are not even remotely close to true, but they don't have to be true in order for them to matter, right? We're dealing whenever we're
Yeah.
dealing whenever we're dealing with things like stereotypes and racial prejudice, we're dealing in the realm of emotion, not the realm of rational thought. So the emotion tells you that
Yeah.
right? And if it feels real to you, then that's really all that matters, because your action is going to go on that. So Los Angeles was kind of this powder keg. It has all these racial groups that have a lot of tension with each other. It has high unemployment and poverty, so a lot of economic anxiety, right? Um, and then it also has a very high crime problem. Los Angeles has a lot of drug dealers, a lot of drug trafficking, a lot of gang warfare going on. So there already is this kind of undercurrent of violence in LA County at this time period. On top of that, so we got those three things: economic problems, racial tension, existing crime. On top of all three of those, we have the most corrupt police force in the country. The Los Angeles Police Department was the police department that had the largest number of complaints in the entire country. The LAPD is oftentimes described as the most powerful gang in the city. they're oftentimes, they function like a gang, right? They roam the streets with guns and weapons, and they beat people without consequence. They kill people, they hurt people. You know, a lot of the cops get caught, you know, being corrupt, including things like, you know, cops, you know, helping with drug traffickers and stuff like that. Every police force in the United States has complaints against it. The LAPD has the most. Right? So you would expect them to have a lot. It's a big police department, right? It's one of the largest in the country. So you would expect them to have one of the highest numbers, but they also have a disproportionately high number, right? Like a per capita number. That's very,
Yeah,
very
like a percentage of police officers.
right. So if you, yeah, if you figure it out like per 10 officers, how many complaints do you have, right?
Yeah.
And like Salt Lake Pete Police Department has like 0.1 complaints for 10 officers or something, right?
Mm.
Where LAPD has like 3 complaints per 10 officers.
Yeah.
Right? I made that number up. It's not a, but I'm giving you an example of how it would work, right? Okay. So the riots break out after the trial. After the trial, King is found guilty of drunk driving. The police officers are found innocent, and this turns into riots. It starts in the Black communities as they start to, you know, burn things and start to loot things. But very, very quickly, it spreads out of the Black communities into the Latino communities, into the white communities, into the Asian communities. Very, very quickly, crime just, or looting and fires and fighting and shooting people spreads across the entire city. One of the most dramatic instances is when the riots start to come to Koreatown. Koreatown is the Korean neighborhood of Los Angeles, and it's next to the Black neighborhoods, right? And so it's next to like Inglewood and Compton, and then Koreatown is next to them. And so as the riots started to reach Koreatown, the Korean immigrants tried calling the cops, but no one came to help them. And so these Korean immigrants started like making forts. They started like making forts around their stores and like opening fire on anyone who walked down the street. Right. And we have at least 2 instances of Koreans mounting themselves up on the rooftops of buildings with fully automatic machine guns and just firing into the crowd. Now, the Koreans, of course, think that they are defending their home and defending their business, right? But everyone else looks at it as these crazy dudes are firing machine guns into the crowds, right? These guys are carrying around like fully automatic Uzis and stuff. Anyway, the LAPD becomes completely overwhelmed within about 2 hours. Within about 2 hours, the LAPD can't handle it, can't do anything about it. The LAFD, the fire department, is overwhelmed within the hour. Within the hour, and so the riots are going to rage on for about 4 days without anyone stopping them. No police, no fire, no nothing. That these riots are just so big, they're in so many neighborhoods, they're across so much of the city that they just go. Right? They eventually bring in the army, they bring in the National Guard, and the National Guard shuts it down. But it's not until there's, you know, a lot of destruction. About 4,500 buildings are burned down. About 4,500 buildings are burned down. About 200 people are killed. It's quite a bit, quite a large riot.
What's the largest riot in the U.S.?
The Tulsa Race Massacre. The Tulsa Race Massacre back in 1921. That's the one where the KKK started like bombing the Black Wall Street. And that one killed about 1,000 people. So that's the worst. I think by number of people involved and number of structures involved, LA riots are probably the worst. But in far of death count, death toll, the Tulsa Race riots. Yeah. So this one stands out. I've skipped a lot of riots. I don't talk about riots that often, right? We've done a couple, but not that many, right? But this one stands out. Why is this one so important?
Did it like spark a movement?
It did not. No, it did not. Everyone thought it was going to fix things, and it does. It actually doesn't really fix things. They didn't change any of the policies or rules for the police department afterwards. The police department was just kind of more careful because they said, "Oh, damn, that got really out of hand. Maybe we should watch ourselves." But they didn't actually change the rules.
Is that why we covered it?
Well, first of all, it's big,
Yeah.
right? It's really big, right? Excuse me. Second of all, it's one of the first riots that is brought on by a videotape, right? And as technology changes, this is going to become more and more common, right? You witnessed this all last year with the George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd, and everything that happened after that with all the Black Lives Matter protests and stuff, right? We've witnessed this a lot now. Okay. The other reason why is that this is an election year, right? This is an election year, so it's actually going to affect the election. So the LA riots happens, and then later that same year, we're going to get Hurricane Andrew. Go ahead and make it another number, Hurricane. I don't think we really need Hurricane Andrew, but Hurricane Andrew, up until this point, was the largest hurricane ever. And it hit Florida, and it just destroyed Florida. And it destroyed Florida, and it did it in August of '92, which results in the election of Bill Clinton. Because George Bush was the president at the time, he didn't handle Hurricane Andrew very well. He didn't handle the LA riots very well, and so Bill Clinton gets elected.
Right, and we don't also
say it again. Nah, the hurricane doesn't. There's not really anything to say. It's just a hurricane.
It's a hurricane.
Yeah, it's a hurricane. It's just the timing matters because the timing happens right before the election.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's better know Bill Clinton real quick. We're not going to spend a lot of time with him because he's not a very important dude. So prior to becoming president, so Bill Clinton should be what? R? Is that right?
Q.
Or Q, okay. So big number Q. Prior to being president, Bill Clinton was the governor of Arkansas. He was also a Rhodes Scholar. He's very, very intelligent guy. Probably one of the most intelligent presidents we've ever had. His nickname is Slick Willie. Slick Willie, which doesn't sound like a very good nickname, right? So he is generally regarded as not a very good president. Not a very good president. I think C- might be too generous to him.
Mm-hmm.
C- might be too generous to him. I think his ranking is dropping quickly. His ranking has been dropping quickly. I would not be uncomfortable giving him probably a D+, you know. Anyway, during his presidency, he presides over the reason why people liked him, right? When he leaves office, he's very, very popular when he leaves office. But the reason why people like him is because the economy grows. During the 1990s, we call this the roaring 90s, and that's because the US economy starts to grow faster than almost any time it's ever grown in history. It has nothing to do with Bill Clinton. What is it? What's causing the growth?
Is it just is it immigrants? Computers and like internet.
It's the invention of the internet. It's the invention of the internet and the invention of computers, right? So the internet's been invented already, but the internet isn't popular yet. I had my first email address in 1993. And I emailed my dad and I said, "Dad, is this email?" And he responded, "Yes, it is." And then I didn't email anyone for like 3 more years because his was the only address I had. Right. And that was right. So the internet really, really starts to become popular around like 97, 98, 96, 97, 98 is when it starts.
Uh-huh.
And when that happens, the economy goes gangbusters. It goes nuts, right? And so Clinton is president while we have an economic boom, which is why everyone likes him, right? But he didn't cause it. If it's one thing we've learned in my class, presidents don't cause the economy, right? Otherwise, every president would cause a good economy. right?
Mhm.
No president would choose a bad economy.
Yeah.
Let's deal with some of the bad stuff on Clinton real quick. Okay. We'll get the good stuff and then we'll do the bad stuff. The good stuff, he's charismatic, he's funny, he's good looking. People like him. He has this like nice way of talking where he like tells stories and stuff, and he makes you feel like, he's just like your uncle on the porch down south telling you a good story, right? He's really good at negotiating. He's good at negotiating. He's charismatic. People like him. Okay? The bad thing about him is that all the evidence shows that he's a serial rapist.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. He's a serial rapist. He's a womanizer. Even in the best description, he still cheats. Even in the best, most generous description, he still cheats on his wife and sleeps with women all the time. But
Uh-huh.
he's credibly accused of raping at least 2 women, right? And the more that we learn about him over time, the more he makes us think that it's like a Me Too moment where this guy probably should not have been in charge because this dude's like has some serial problems with women.
Mhm.
Real
I'm just surprised that Hillary stayed with him through it. I'm like, what?
marriages are complicated, right?
Yeah.
Relationships are complicated, and nothing is more difficult than another person's wedding, another person's marriage, right? If you look at someone else's relationship, relationships are complicated, and people stay for all sorts of reasons, right?
Mhm.
And maybe she just maybe she loves 100 things about him and hates 5.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know. I don't know them personally, but relationships are complicated. That's all,
Yeah.
right? And they've been married for like 40 years, right?
Yeah.
They've been married for 40 years, so that's a lot of history there. That's a big deal. So you may feel like if your spouse did the stuff that he did, right, that you would want to get rid of your spouse, and I may feel that same way, but that doesn't mean she has to feel that way.
Oh yeah.
Relationships are complicated, man. Right? Okay, we're gonna leave. Oh, there's some other you can. So Clinton is also going to be president while we have a rise in terrorism. We're going to get a rise in Islamic terrorism, and we're also going to get a rise in domestic terrorism, like right-wing extremist terrorism. Of course, Bill Clinton is not responsible for the rise of terrorism, of course, right? Otherwise, he would choose to not have it.
Mhm.
But we know that September 11th is coming, right? We know that September
Yeah.
11th is going to come right after Clinton leaves office. And so, because we know 9/11 is coming, we're looking for the causes, right?
Mhm.
And when we go back and look at the causes, we can see a chain of terrorism starting to happen during the 90s. We can see it. We can see it coming, but I'll tell you now that people in the 90s did not see it coming. People in the 90s didn't see it as a connected pattern the way that we in 2021 see it. So, cool. All right.
Cool.
All right. On that note, we're going to